Hello everyone, Lysa here. I'm an officer in a top 700 rating guild, and also an average Mythic Plus player with around 4.4k score. The last couple of weeks I've been testing a lot of beta, legendaries, covenants, and I'm going to share my opinion with you today about the Resto Legendaries from Shadowlands beta. So, the first legendary we're going to talk about is just called Druid Resto Runecar 4. I'm just going to call it the Rejuv Legendary. Rejuvenation healing has a 2% chance to create a new rejuvenation on a nearby target. So for Mythic Plus, this is probably the worst legendary you'll find. When it procs, it does proc really rarely in Mythic Plus because how often do you actually have rejuve on 5 targets? That's not that often, right? And when it does proc, it's going on the wrong target because it doesn't go on an injured nearby target, it just goes on a nearby target. So for Mythic Plus, as of now, this is not a good legendary. When it comes to raiding though, it is one of the best, if not the best. This is the legendary I've used the most in raids, and I've tested most of the bosses, and this legendary is really strong. This was a set bonus back in Nighthold in Legion, and it was really broken back then, and I can kind of feel it now as well. It's really strong. It makes Germination a viable build for raiding, which I also like because that playstyle it feels really good. And on the bosses I tried, it has worked very well so far. The numbers were there. It felt good. I have the haste I need. Really solid legendary for raiding. I would rate this really high, if probably the best one. So the next legendary I'm going to take a look at is just called Druid Resto Runecar 3. Swiftmend no longer consumes a heal over time effect and extends the duration of your heal over time effects on a target by 10 seconds. This was a wrist legendary back in Legion, I believe. Was not used very often back then, but this might not be the case in Shadowlands. For those who don't know, Swiftmend went through a rough change from BFA to Shadowlands, where first of all you get a hot on the target, and it also consumes the hot. The way they tried to fix that was by reducing the cooldown of it, which is good, right? I kind of feel like they ruined it. That might just be me. I really like the way Swiftmend has been in BFA, but the first week where I played without this legendary, it felt quite terrible, to be honest. You know, from being able to normally use Swiftmend whenever I want to as a panic heal. If someone suddenly drops low, you can just boom Swiftmend them. But you couldn't really do that in Shadowlands anymore. So after I put this legendary on, I tried in a couple of dungeons. It was a huge change. This also increased my DPS a lot. Because let's say just the tank is taking damage, you use a Swiftmend on him, all the hots just all of a sudden, you know, last for 20 plus seconds. This gives you a big window to DPS. So this is kind of a DPS increased legendary, but also a strong single target healing increased legendary. So if I was going to rate this legendary, I would rate it pretty high. It kind of fixes the issues you have with Swiftmend after the change. It increases your single target healing. It also increases your damage in some way. So I would rate this legendary on a B plus or A tier level for Mythic Plus. As for rating, I wouldn't rate it very high. Kind of like same in Legion, where it could be used in some unique cases. I did try it in raid, did not feel very good compared to the Rejuv Legendary that I previously talked about. So as of now, this is in the bottom tier when it comes to rating, for me at least. So the next legendary I'm going to talk about is called the Dark Titan's Lesson. You may Lifebloom 2 targets at once, and Lifebloom's final healing is increased by 100%. This is a belt legendary from Legion, I believe, and also a tier 18 set bonus. This is quite a unique legendary. I think it's really cool. It kind of changes the way you play, like you have to spend so many more globals on Lifebloom. I don't think it affects your DPS much. I think it actually decreases your DPS, so maybe for the top end players this might not be the play. I also think like the top end players, they can juggle the Lifebloom between yourself and the target actually needs it. So I don't think this is going to be played in the highest level of keys. As for mid tier to lower tier, I think this is a really solid legendary. It it makes the gameplay easier, because your DPS does not matter on lower keys, you know, compared to a high key. So I think lower to mid-tier players can use this legendary and get a lot of value from it. Because it makes the gameplay so much easier. You always have Lifebloom on yourself. You can have the other one on the tank, on someone else taking damage. So, solid legendary. I would rate this at maybe a B+ to A tier legendary. It's not quite the S tier because I just don't think it's gonna be used for the top end players. So we're gonna have to wait and see until Shadowlands hits. But as of now, B+, A tier legendary. So the final Resto Druid specific legendary I'm going to talk about is called Memory of the Mother Tree. Wild Growth has a 25% chance to cause your next rejuvenation or regrowth to apply to 2 additional allies within 20 yards of the target. This was a artifact trait back in Legion, I believe, which you just passively had, which made it quite, you know, it was just cool back then. As of now, it works the same way, but it takes a legendary slot, and I don't think it's quite there yet to you know, compete versus the other ones. I feel it's really random when it does proc, which is like 1 out of 4 times you use Wild Growth. Like when you use Wild Growth, you kind of already have the rejuves on the targets you want it on, and the regrowths, if that's what you're going to use it for, it's kind of random whether it hits injured allies or not. As of now, it doesn't seem like it does. I think this legendary has great potential if Blizzard just changes it slightly, make it jump to the most injured allies, kind of like Wild Growth does. This will make this a solid legendary, but as of now, I would not rate this very high. I would rate this legendary a B for rating and a C for Mythic Plus. So the first general legendary I want to talk about is called just Druid Runecaster 4. When Moonfire, Rake, Rip, or Rejuvenation are on a single target, their effects are increased by 30%. This is a anima power from Torghast, just slightly nerfed compared to Torghast where it's 100%. I don't think the damage is there yet. I did try it in a couple of dungeons. I'm also running with the Covenant Night Fae, so my Convoke the Spirits kind of ruins this legendary for me when I'm bursting, because it uses Moonfire on random targets, it uses Rejuves on random allies, so it kind of, the synergy is not there, and it didn't really increase my damage overall that much, maybe by like 100 to 200. So as of now, I don't think this is a good legendary. I have not tried it in Raid yet, so I can't really rate it for Raid, but just from reading it, I would say this is a C legendary, maybe D, for both Mythic Plus and rating. So the next legendary I'm going to talk about is called Druid Runecaster 1. Effects of Thick Hide, Astral Influence, Feline Swiftness, and Ysera's Gift increased by 75%. When you shift into your Affinities form, you gain Heart of the Wild for 10 seconds once every minute. This was a Legion legendary, but back then it did not have the Heart of the Wild part of it, and that's what makes it strong, really. The Feline Swiftness, Ysera's Gift, you don't really notice it. You kind of notice the movement speed from Feline Swiftness, but you don't really need that as a Resto Druid. You're already mobile enough. So it's only for the damage increase you will use this legendary. So every minute you can kind of do, you know, you can burst a little bit. This also has good synergy with the Night Fae ability, Convoke the Spirits. It works really well with it because that has a 2-minute cooldown, so every 2 minutes you can do this crazy burst, kind of. When I did use it, I had this like 6-7k burst opener, which is pretty good. And what I found out was the best, and this increased my damage overall quite a lot, is that you already have a Rake and Rip on the target before you use or trigger the Heart of the Wild. This increased my damage a lot, because then you can, you know, just shred Ferocious Bite, instead of needing to put the Rake up, put the Rip up. So you wasted kind of a lot of valuable globals in your burst window. So I really recommend to do that if you're gonna play with this legendary. As of now, I would rate this legendary pretty high. I have not tried it in Raid. I do not think it's gonna be that good for raid, because you also need a lot of healing in raids compared to Mythic Plus. But it has potential. I think they could buff it a little bit, actually. I would rather have them nerf the first part of it, the effects of Thick-Eyed Astral Influence, Feline Swiftness, and Azira's Gift. Maybe nerf that to 50% and then buff Heart of the Wild to maybe 15 seconds. That would make it a lot more viable. Maybe even for raiding, because there is windows where you can do that in raid as well, like go and DPS for 50 seconds. But as of now, I don't think it's strong for raid. I would rate it as a maybe C legendary for raiding. But for Mythic Plus, I think it's up there. I think it's a B legendary, in my opinion. And it's competing versus the other ones. So the next legendary I'm going to talk about is called Lycara's Fleeting Glimpse. Every 45 seconds while in combat, cast a spell based on your form. So if you're in no form, it will cast Wild Growth. If you're in cat form, it will cast Primal Wrath. If you're in bear form, it will cast Barkskin. If you're in moonkin form, it casts Starfall. If you're in travel form, it will cast Stampeding Roar. It's quite a unique legendary. I kind of like it because you kind of have to plan, you know. Oh, are we gonna take damage now? Am I gonna deal damage now? Do I need an extra Barkskin now? You know, these kinds of things. But I did not have a timer for this when I tested it. I couldn't figure out a weaker. I couldn't find the spell ID for some reason when I tried it. So I kind of had to just use a clock, which was kind of Pepega. But when it worked really well. But when it didn't work, it felt kind of wasted. My Wild Growth just procced and I was like, I didn't need it. But quite unique. I don't think it's there. I don't think it ever will be. I would rate this, you know, C, maybe C+. As for rating, same thing, maybe C+ or C. I don't think it's going to get used a lot, but it has potential. So the final general Resto Druid Legendary I'm going to talk about is just again called Druid Room Carve something. Your damage over time effects deal their damage in 25% less time, and your healing over time effects occur in 15% less time. This is, as of now, in my opinion, the best legendary you can have for Mythic Plus. It impacts your gameplay a lot more than you think. You might read it and be like, oh, that's boring. It's actually not. It's actually really fun to play with. Your dots last a short amount of time. Your hots last a shorter amount of time. Like my Lifebloom, instead of 15 seconds, which it normally lasts for, it now lasts for 12.8 with this legendary equipped. As for DPSing, I'm used to a 24-second rip, but now it lasts for 18 seconds with this legendary. It speeds up the gameplay, it feels really good, your DPS goes up, your healing goes up. Really happy with the legendary, and this is the only legendary, as of now, I would rate on S tier level for Mythic Plus. For raiding, on the other hand, I tried it on one boss. It did not work properly, I don't think, back then. This was a week ago. But if it did work, it was not very good. I couldn't really DPS much on in the raids right now, because there's so much healing needed on bosses, they're kind of overtuned. So based on the information I have so far, I don't think it's good for raiding. As of now, this could change. Maybe the bosses were just overtuned and I couldn't even, you know, get to try DPSing. As of now, this is, you know, a mediocre legendary for Mythic for raiding, in my opinion. So I would place it in around C. Now that I've gone over every single Resto Druid legendary that you can possibly get, I'm going to quickly put up on my screen the raid and Mythic Plus legendaries, the way I rated them. And I also want to thank everyone for watching this video, and I hope I'll see you again. Thank you.